There is a moment coming in the next few weeks where the most useful thing you can do for your salvia is put the shears down and walk away from it. Not because the job is finished, because from that point onward, every cut you make actively works against the plant. And almost nobody talks about that moment because gardening advice tends to be built around doing things. Deadhead more, feed more, tidy more. Very little of it tells you where the line is, and salvia has a line. So this video is really about two things. The right way to deadhead salvia, which is not what most people are doing and is the actual reason so many salvias never rebloom properly. And then the date after which you stop, which is different for you than it is for me, and which I am going to help you work out. Let me start with the part that surprises people, because it reframes everything else. If your salvia has disappointed you, if it gave you one good flush of color in June, and then sat there looking like a tired green mound for the rest of the summer, there is a very good chance the problem is not the plant, the soil, the sun, or the water. It is that you deadheaded it politely. Here's what I mean by that. Most people deadhead salvia the way they deadhead everything else. They find a flower spike that has gone brown, they snip the brown bit off the top, and they move on to the next one. 20 minutes later, the plant looks tidy, the brown is gone, and it feels like a job well done. And the plant does very little in response. Because salvia, particularly the common perennial types like Salvia nemorosa, the caradonna, and Maynite and Blue Hill sort of plants, does not respond to tip removal. It responds to being cut back. The correct treatment after that first flush finishes is not a snip. It is a shear. You cut the whole plant back by roughly a half, taking the spent flower stems down toward the low mound of foliage sitting at the base. That feels aggressive the first time you do it. You are looking at a plant that still has some color in it, taking a large proportion of it away, and standing there wondering if you have made a mistake. You have not. Within a couple of weeks, the plant pushes fresh growth from that basal mound, and a few weeks after that, you get a second flush of flowers. Not always as heavy as the first, but a genuine second display rather than a few sad spikes. That is the difference between a salvia that flowers for 3 weeks and a salvia that flowers on and off from June into September. And it is entirely down to how far down you cut. Subscribe before we get into the timing, because everything from here depends on your specific location. And this channel is built around getting the right job to you in the right month. Now, an important distinction, because salvia is not one plant. It is a genus with hundreds of species that behave completely differently, and lumping them together is why so much salvia advice contradicts itself. There are broadly 3 groups you are likely to be growing. The first is the herbaceous perennial salvias, Salvia nemorosa and its relatives. Low mound of foliage at the base, upright flower spikes in violet, purple, pink, or white, hardy through most of the country. These are the ones I have just described, and they are the ones this video is mainly about. The second is the shrubby or woody salvias, Salvia Greggii, Salvia microphylla, and the culinary sage in your herb bed, Salvia officinalis. These have permanent woody stems that persist through winter, and they behave far more like lavender than like a perennial. The third is the tender, or fall-flowering salvias, Salvia leucantha, the Mexican bush sage, and Salvia guaranitica, the deep blue one often sold as black and blue. These flower late into autumn, and they have a completely different timetable. Keep those 3 in your head, because the August answer is different for each one, and I will come back to all 3. Now, the timing, and this is the heart of it. The reason there is a cutoff date at all comes down to what a cut actually does. When you deadhead or shear a salvia, you are sending the plant a signal. You are removing its attempt to set seed, and the plant responds by trying again. It pushes new growth, and that new growth is soft, green, and completely unhardened. Through June and July, that is exactly what you want. There is plenty of season left. That soft growth matures, sets buds, and gives you flowers. But as the season shortens, the arithmetic changes. At some point, the plant no longer has enough warm weather left to take that new soft growth all the way through to flowering. And worse, it does not have enough time to harden that growth off before cold arrives. So you end up with a plant that has spent its late season energy producing tender tissue that never flowers and then gets damaged by the first hard frost. That damage is not just cosmetic. Frost-killed soft growth at the crown of a plant is an entry point, and what gets in over a wet winter is rot, which means the last useful deadhead is roughly 6 weeks before your average first frost. Work that backwards for yourself because it lands in a completely different place depending on where you garden. If your first frost typically arrives in late September, which covers the colder zones 3, 4, and the top half of 5, then your cutoff was early August. If you are watching this in the middle of the month, you are done. Stop now. If you are looking at an early to mid-October frost, zones 5 and 6, you have until roughly the middle of August and then you stop. If your frost does not arrive until November, most of zones 7 and 8, you have the whole of August and a reasonable stretch of September before you need to think about it. And in the mildest zones, 9 and 10, frost is not really the limiting factor. Your timing is governed by the plant's own bloom cycle rather than the calendar. So it is not a date, it is a subtraction. Find your average first frost, count back 6 weeks, and that is the day you put the shears down. If this is useful, hit like. One tap, and it puts this in front of somebody who is about to give their salvia a haircut 3 weeks too late. Now, what does stopping actually look like and what happens if you do it? This is the part that people find genuinely difficult, because a salvia that has been left alone from late summer onward does not look its best. The final flush of flowers fades and stays on the plant. The spikes go brown. The whole thing takes on a slightly disheveled look right at the point in the year when everything else in the border is also looking rough. Every instinct says tidy it, but here is what those standing stems are doing while they look untidy. They are protecting the crown. The base of a salvia is where next year's plant lives, and a canopy of old stems above it provides a genuine buffer against wind, ice, and the freeze-thaw cycles that heave crowns out of the ground in late winter. That is why almost all the guidance on hardy salvias says to leave the growth on through winter and cut in early spring when new growth appears. They are also holding seed, and the seed-eating birds work salvia spikes through the cold months in the same way they work cone flower. And they are giving you structure. A row of upright brown salvia spikes rimed with frost on a January morning is doing more for that border than bare soil. So the correct sequence for a hardy perennial salvia is this. Deadhead and shear through the summer to keep it flowering. Stop 6 weeks before frost. Leave the plant entirely alone through autumn and winter. Then cut it back to the low basal rosette in early spring once the danger of hard frost has passed and you can see fresh growth pushing. That spring cut is the real annual pruning. Everything you do in summer is maintenance. Now the other two groups, because the rules are different and getting them mixed up is where people run into trouble. The shrubby salvias first. Salvia Greggii, Microphylla, and Culinary sage. These are structurally much closer to lavender than to a herbaceous perennial. They build a permanent woody framework, and that old wood carries very few dormant buds. Cut hard into the bare woody base and you may get nothing back at all. I have read accounts from growers who inherited old, unpruned Salvia Greggii plants and found that 2 out of 3 simply never responded to pruning, because the wood had gone too far. Same dead end as an old lavender. So the rule for these is light summer trimming only, staying well within the leafy growth, and the real annual cut happens in spring. And there is a specific warning here worth stating plainly. University of California. Marin master gardeners note that these woody salvias can be pruned hard in late fall or in spring, but that if your climate includes many nights of freezing temperatures, spring is the right choice, because the previous year's growth shelters the emerging new growth beneath it. So if you get real winters, do not touch the structure of a woody salvia now. Wait for spring, and cut back to just above the lowest emerging foliage, never below it. Now the third group, and this is the one where August pruning does the most damage. The fall flowering salvias, Mexican bush sage, Salvia guaranitica, and their relatives. These plants flower late by design. They spend the summer building the growth that carries their autumn display, and that display is the entire reason you planted them. Texas master gardeners put the rule very simply. You can pinch back the stem tips of fall-blooming salvias regularly until about the end of June, and then you stop, because the plant needs the rest of the season to set the buds for its autumn show. So if you have a Mexican bush sage in your border and you have been keeping it tidy with the shears through July and August, you have been removing the flowers you were waiting for. The plant looks compact and healthy, and it simply never delivers, and almost nobody connects the two. For these, August is a hands-off month entirely. Leave them alone and let them do what they are for. Let me pull all of that together because it sounds like a lot, and it really is not. If you grow the common hardy perennial salvias, the Nemorosa types, then deadheading is not a snip. It is a shear back by half after the flush fades, down toward the basal mound, and that is what actually triggers a second display. You keep doing that through the summer until roughly 6 weeks before your average first frost, and then you stop completely. In cold zones, that has already happened. In mild zones, you have several weeks left. After that, you leave the plant standing all winter because the old growth protects the crown, feeds birds, and gives you structure, and you make the real cut in early spring once new growth appears. If you grow woody salvias, treat them like lavender. Light trimming within the green only, no structural cutting now, and the proper prune happens in spring above the lowest new foliage. And if you grow fall flowering salvias, this month you do nothing at all. Their deadline was the end of June, and the display is coming. 3 quick things before you go. Subscribe and hit the bell, because everything on this channel is timed, and the salvia job that matters in March is a completely different one from this. Drop a comment telling me which of the 3 types you are growing and what your average first frost date is, because I would like to know how many people watching are already past their cutoff and do not realize it yet. And hit like if the shear by half thing was new to you, because I suspect a large number of people have been politely snipping their salvia for years and quietly concluding it just is not a very good rebloomer. Now go out and look at yours. If you are inside your window and the first flush has faded, shear it back by half and you will get another round. If you are outside your window, do nothing. Let it stand. Let it go brown. Let it protect itself through the winter. The best gardeners are not the ones doing the most in August. They are the ones who know the exact point at which doing more starts costing them something.